no letdown from the excitement. I get sweaty when I'm casting, and I get sweaty when I'm walking. Clearly, I need to step up my exercise regimen because it's not a good sign. It is hot over here in California, so I have that going for me. That is my excuse. That's the only excuse I can think of. And it wasn't a very exciting games today as well. So there's all those things going for me. No apologies for sweating, except the ones I've already given. I'm sorry.
Alright, so now that we have a brief overview of Sotere's day today, let's jump into our short segment at the beginning of the show on unconventional supports. And as you can see by the picture on the screen, I think you can tell what support we're going to talk about. It's support Fiddlesticks, which is actually seen play at higher levels lately. So, Sotere, do you want to go over a little bit about what makes support Fiddle a good choice?
Yeah, I certainly will. And I would like to say, a lot of the times we want to bring things to the forefront that actually haven't been tested out, haven't been tried. But support Fiddlesticks is actually competitively viable, has been tried out in tournaments. He is the Harbinger of Doom. And what makes him so great is, one, early game power. Like at level 1, 2, you absolutely can't fight him because, you know, the Drain ability does a lot of damage and provides him a lot of sustain. And then when you get into later games, he has some of the longest CC in the game with a 3-second fear. And also a silence to go along with that, with pretty good range itself, and that's not even mentioning his ultimate, which is Crowstorm, which has good base numbers. So at level 6, you definitely can't fight in that lane against him. You're gonna be feared for 3 seconds, and then suddenly you're going to have him jumping on you and doing a ton of damage.
Yep. And so, I mean, it seems like he has good CC with his Fear, he has good damage, has good base damage, so can provide good utility both in lane and out of lane. If you get that 3-second Fear on the enemy AD carry, for example, that's 3 seconds of the AD carry not doing damage during the entire team fight, so that's really good for team fights as well. But, I mean, there are worries about Fiddlesticks as he is a bit squishy.
He is squishy, and that really hurts your, your damage output when you're a jungler, when you're really relying, and your team is relying on you to put down a decent amount of damage with Crowstorm. But as a support, you are the least important player on the team, so if you jump in there and you Crowstorm, and you can stay alive for a little while, if they focus on you, if they use any summoner spells on you, well, suddenly they're at a big disadvantage, because hopefully also when you jump in there in Crowstorm, you're going to get, close to the back lines, and you'll be able to fear a priority target. And that is, big on its own right. Even if you're not doing a ton of damage, you will be bringing yourself to the forefront, making them focus you, kind of in the same sense that a Nunu would be a crowd control soak. So can Fiddle be a damage and crowd control soak, and really do a lot of front-loaded, CC-oriented things to the enemy team.
Yeah, so Fiddlesticks, I mean, a pretty good support. I've actually never tried it out. Have you tried out support Fiddle before?
I have done it a couple of times to mixed results, but it's funny because when I play supports, it's not necessarily how the game goes that determines how effective my supports are. For instance, every time I play Lulu, I dominate my lane, but I feel like we dominate our lane so much that they're devoting, the middle to be sent down to our lane. They have the jungler really camp us out, and then suddenly they turn around that lane through a number of ganks. But that doesn't mean your support is bad. It just means that it was so good that the enemy team had to do something drastic to compensate for it. And I think the same thing can be done with Fiddle. I've played with him, but I've played against him quite a bit in high elo solo queue, and it's really, really frustrating going against him, because even if you're careful those first couple of levels, suddenly you get to like level 7 and level 8, and I've had this issue where, either I go back to lane, or my laning partner, or the jungler goes into my lane, and they don't realize, oh, I'm going to be essentially stunned for 3 entire seconds while the AD carry can pound away at me. And most of the time, that leads to a death. That 3-second duration from Terrify is ridiculous, especially if it sends you in the way you don't want to run. And also he's going to be able to drain you, going to be able to throw out that Dark Wind, and the AD carry is going to be able to pummel away on you. So it's a lot of extra damage coming in from Fiddlesticks that you wouldn't generally expect from a support. And now that, Mercury Treads aren't as favored, I feel like they've kind of fallen out of favor. All of these extra tenacity items were offered by Riot. They came out with a bunch of new items, but no one builds tenacity. No, I haven't seen any of those tenacity items in God knows how long. So, everyone's like, oh, well, there's new items. We don't have to buy Mercury Treads, but no one buys them. So everyone is going to be feared for that entire 3 seconds. Everyone except, perhaps the odd jungler or odd bruiser who will build Merc Treads. Everyone else is going to get hit for a full 3 seconds. And sometimes team fights only last 3 seconds. So that can be a really big deal.
Yep. And so for skills, I mean, Drain seems like a good option. The Terrify, you really want to get that 3 seconds up as soon as possible. And you have that the silence with your Dark Wind. So, I mean, what should be your skill order? Do you, or what in your opinion should be the skill order for support Fiddlesticks?
I'm pretty sure you max out that Terrify, just get the longest amount of CC as possible. Dark Wind is a great ability. You can really zone out the enemy with Dark Wind. It's a great laning utility. It's great in team fights. It does good things all around and good amounts of damage when it starts bouncing back and forth between players. But at the same time, you want to make sure, as a support, this is just a general advice given to other people, you want to give your AD carry control of the lane. Whether that means he's going to push it or he's going to freeze it at his turret, it's really up to him to decide, this is what I want to do with my minion wave. He has to be the one to farm all the minions, and he has to be the one that controls the lane. And you can give advice, and if the other team goes back, you can help push the wave. But in general, you don't want to level up skills that could potentially, inadvertently push the lane. And if you level up Dark Wind, then those bounces of those crows or bats or whatever they happen to be would potentially, push the lane, and you might not want that in any given instance. It's kind of like Janna's Tornado. Yes, it's a great ability, but you don't level it up because you don't want the extra damage, and you try not to send it through the minion wave because you don't want to inadvertently push the minion wave back towards the opposition. So for those reasons, I would go with Q first. I mean, if the other lane, or if your lane opponents are trying to be very aggressive with you, then you can also go, with the Drain instead, which will actually give you the better, one-on-one presence in fights, and perhaps two-on-two presence, especially if they are, a matchup that doesn't have a great interruptibility. That being said, most supports are going to have a good interruptibility, but are they going to want to use that on you? If it's Taric, like, for instance, if you start draining, is he really going to waste that Dazzle on you, or is he going to, still want to save it for the AD carry? It's a tough call.
So, yeah, I mean, one important thing that you mentioned that I think is worth repeating is that as a support, you not only want to give your AD carry the last hits, but you also want you want to make sure that they have good lane control. And even if you're not taking the last hits with your Dark Wind, you might, give up a little bit of lane control from your AD carry if you use the Dark Wind on minions. So not exactly ideal, but yeah, I mean, the silence is good, and it does do good damage, so it's a good skill nonetheless. But yeah, I mean, that is support Fiddle. You guys can try that out if you want. It's a viable support, so don't let anyone tell you any different. But but yeah, I mean, this is our job to see and look at champions who might be viable in the support role, and looks like Fiddlesticks, just on paper at least, and it seems in practice, does a good job in that role. So definitely try him out. But moving on to the topic of today. This is actually somewhat related, or actually very related to supports, and it is on gold per 10 items. So do you want to talk a little bit about gold per 10 items, Sotere?
I would like to talk about them. We have some nice functionality where you can see now, finally, how much gold per 10 items are earning you over the course of the game. That's very cool. But gold per 10 items, the two most popular ones, did recently get nerfed, with the Philosopher's Stone and Heart of Gold both taking pretty substantial hits. Philosopher's Stone not giving the same amount of regen as it did. Heart of Gold giving 50 less life. So previously you would upgrade the Ruby Crystal into a Heart of Gold, and you would get an extra 70 life from 180 to 250. Now you only get an extra 20 life, so minus 50 life, which is a substantial hit. Certainly, takes away from that early game power, early game extra survivability that a Heart of Gold would otherwise give you. Kage's Lucky Pick, or KG's Lucky Pick, however you want to pronounce it, also kind of got a nerf a while back in the sense that Deathfire Grasp got nerfed. I mean, it's hard to say how that turned out. At earlier stages of the game, it was a nerf to Deathfire Grasp, so a lot of the champions that would previously really like it tend not to want to build it as early. But despite all these things, despite the nerfs that are coming down, I think Average Blade has actually always been the most gold efficient of the GP10 items. I think you get the most stats for the price you pay for it, especially now that harder golds are getting nerfed. I don't think there's any question about it. The Average Blade gives you especially the best team fight presence, as it gives you extra critical strike. But even that, not necessarily worthwhile and not very, highly focused on as an item to build, because most people don't like building Uomos after it. So there is, that item has still been kind of, been left by the wayside. But even after all these nerfs, I've been casting tournaments. We cast the GG Classic last weekend. I was casting today the Fnatic Raid Call Cup, and so many people are building GP10s. And in the past, there were occasionally people who would be like, okay, well, let's start building on our top lane or on our jungler. They've been a staple of supports for a really long time, but now more recently we see them on AP middles a lot, and it's not just the really strong top laners that do it. Like, it used to be, okay, if you have a really strong top laner, you can get away with building 2 GP10 items and still being okay in your lane. But now a lot of other top laners will get it, even if they're kind of suffering in top lane, and people get it, if they're losing a game, if they're winning a game, they're like, I just want that extra gold. So I mean, that's kind of the initial impression I have to give, is that they are becoming more and more popular. Of course, we have pictures of all of them for you. That doesn't bring too much to the table, but they are all, yes, I like that. I like that graphic, the Heart of Gold graphic. And that's a crazy thing. So Heart of Gold gets nerfed 50 gold, or 50 hit points. In general, the League of Legends community, both professional and casual, overreacts to nerfs. If a champion gets nerfed, suddenly they don't get played. And that is because there are, 101 champions now, perhaps. There's a lot of champions. And what that means is, if your main champion or a champion you like playing gets nerfed, you have someone to fall back on who is just as viable, very close to them in the power aspect. But when items get nerfed, there's not really other things to fall back on. And I think I've been talking quite long enough. Chime on in here, Zero. What do you think?
Well, I think the main issue with... okay, so let's start with Heart of Gold. And let's start with Heart of Gold on supports. So supports really don't have any method of gold generation besides passive gold gain and any gold pretend items, quints, or masteries that they might have. So...
And assists.
Sorry? Oh, and assists, yes. And kills if they steal any kills, but
yes.
In general, their main method of gold generation will not be from kills or CS, it would be from assists or